It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm going to begin with a quotation from Winston Churchill, who would have been, I think, very pleased by this event. He said, "We make our buildings, and afterwards they make us." In a similar spirit, we make our technologies, and our technologies shape us. They don't just change what we do instrumentally, they change the way we think. Digital technology, the focus of our conversation today, has shaped the mindset of the students who come to us. And I offer today a few examples of this with clear pedagogical implications for the future of higher education. The first I call the myth of multitasking. Our students grew up with always on you technology. We're all carrying it with us. We know what we mean. And in this world, success, they grew up with a measure of success that tends to be measured by texts answered, calls responded to, getting rid of your email. There's volume and velocity, even when we're considering matters over which we should take our time. Our students face a paradox. We tell them that their world is increasingly complex, yet we've created a communications culture that has decreased the time available for anyone to sit and think uninterrupted. Many educators have pushed what I call the myth of multitasking, the idea that this was the indispensable skill for digital culture. I mean, of course it's needed, but the idea that it wasn't just indispensable, it was somehow better. The most recent and best research is definitive. When you multitask, you do everything worse. To put it most starkly, we're not going to get rid of this technology. We use it every day, but we need to tell and teach our students that to succeed, they need to periodically turn it off. Not so easy, since this is a generation that experiences their BlackBerries and their iPhones as extensions of their mind. One Harvard fellow says, "When my iPhone died, it was like a death. I felt as though I had lost my mind." Second, I call simulation and its discontents. Today's college students are in the first generation to grow up thinking that simulation is not second best. 25 years ago, senior professors in engineering complained that the transition from slide rules to calculators had affected their students' ability to deal with issues of scale. When students used slide rules, they had to insert decimal points themselves, and the professors insisted that this discipline required their students to maintain a mental sense of scale, whereas those who relied on calculators made frequent errors in orders of magnitude. They had lost their ability to do back-of-the-envelope calculations, and with that, an intuitive feel for the material. Now, that calculator crisis seems very far away, but I think it was a harbinger of today's reality. In art, science, design, engineering, social science, my own field, and in the humanities, we are all doing more and more of our work in simulation, something that does not always force us to fully confront the real. Now, experienced scholars and researchers and practitioners have the wisdom to work around this. One of my colleagues in design spoke of the appropriate attitude towards simulation as a combination of doing and doubting. You trust the simulation, but you learn that it only takes you so far. This attitude is something that students need to be taught. I did field work observing an architecture class where I saw what doing looks like without doubting. A design student, a very brilliant student, drew a road on a slope that was too steep to support it. The student made this mistake because he had left out a contour line. In his on-screen drawing, a contour line represented 25 feet on the site. When I talked to the student, and the student explained to me what had happened, he said, "Well, it was only one contour." Given the screen resolution of the machine he was working on, it would have been impossible to distinguish the lines on the screen, the contour lines, if he had added the missing contour line. The student's screen could not accommodate more contour lines, and the student had deferred to the technology. Now, screen resolution is always improving, but there will always be something in the physical or the social real that will not be represented by your simulation. And we will always be tempted in some ways to defer to our technology. Simulation reality will always leave something out, yet simulation comes more and more to seem like reality itself. In a design seminar, the master architect Louis Kahn once asked, "What does a brick want?" If in that spirit we ask, "What does simulation want?" we know what it wants. It wants and it demands immersion. Simulation makes itself easy to love and difficult to doubt. But it also has become clear that it can tempt its users into a lack of fealty to the real. I like my colleagues' characterization of the appropriate attitude toward simulation as doing and doubting. This critical stance needs to be part of pedagogy. In the digital age, it is not something that comes naturally to a generation that has grown up in simulation, because when you grow up in simulation, you take things at interface value. Which brings me to what I call the new opacity. In the early 1980s, most computer users who spoke of transparency meant that, as with any other machine, you could open the hood and see inside your computer. But only a few years later, with the introduction of the Macintosh in 1984, people began to use the word transparency when they talked about seeing their documents and programs represented by attractive and easy-to-use icons that they could activate with a double click. This Macintosh meaning of transparency referred to that ability to double click, to make things work precisely without knowing how they worked, without needing to go below the screen surface. In other words, transparency now means what we used to call opacity. We learn to take things at interface value. Our students grew up playing simulation games. They come to us in a simulation frame of mind. And this translates into a willingness, a lot of good things, to throw away the manual and experiment with what works by combining and recombining. Levi-Strauss would have called it bricolage, finding relationships among things on the surface. This way of working has many, many virtues. But sometimes opening up the hood is what you want students to do. Call it that old-fashioned reductive understanding, and this is a pedagogical challenge because simulation culture, the culture in which we are immersed, does not teach it. My concluding thought: we have some new pedagogical responsibilities. Among these, a new kind of media literacy. Never has our world been more complex, and we need to think it through. Our world is not linear. Never have we so needed to entertain as many contradictory ideas at the same time. Never have we more needed to keep our eye on the real. Our tools must help us accomplish that. And if they don't, or if they don't right now, well, we have to reshape what we have made. And in the meantime, at the very least, we must approach our tools with appropriate doubt. This is the positive and constructive challenge that technology offers pedagogy. Because of every technology, we must ask, does it serve our human purposes? A question that causes us happily to reconsider what these purposes are. Thank you.